The Atlantic Promise, a historical romance based on real events. Hook. On a fog-heavy morning in April 1892, as the port of New York trembled beneath the weight of arriving steamships, a woman stepped onto American soil, carrying nothing but a stitched leather trunk, a forged surname, and a love that was already supposed to be dead. She did not know that within weeks newspapers would print her face beside words like disappearance, immigration fraud, and unsolved scandal. She did not know that the man she loved, left behind in Europe, was sailing toward her under a different name. And she did not know that their reunion would quietly alter the lives of senators, bankers, and thousands of immigrants who would never learn her name. History would remember the ships. History would remember the laws. History would remember the wars. But history would almost forget them. Almost. Part 1. The World She Left Behind. Vienna, Austro-Hungarian Empire, winter 1886. Snow fell with aristocratic discipline in Vienna, slow, deliberate, and obedient to gravity. It softened the edges of empire-built stone buildings and hushed the city into a false sense of permanence. Horse-drawn carriages moved like shadows along the Ringstrasse, their wheels cutting through slush, while gas lamps flickered in pale defiance of the night. Elena Weiss stood at the tall window of her family's apartment, watching the city, as though it might answer her. She was 19 years old and already tired of history. Behind her, the apartment breathed with inherited wealth. Walnut bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, oil paintings of ancestors whose names were remembered only by servants, and a grand piano that had not been played since her mother's death. The Weiss family had made its fortune in textiles, linen, wool, later cotton, supplying uniforms to imperial armies that marched under flags no longer respected by the young. Her father believed borders were eternal. Elena knew better. She pressed her gloved fingers against the cold glass. Across the street, students gathered outside Café Central, arguing loudly about nationalism, socialism, and America, the mythical land where one could be reborn by sheer will. America. She had never seen the ocean. "You'll catch cold," her father said without looking up from his desk. "I won't," she replied softly. He finally glanced at her. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." A pause stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. He knew she was restless. Vienna had become too small for her questions, too rigid for her curiosity. She read newspapers from Paris, London, and New York. She spoke English with surprising fluency. She asked why women could not vote, why Jews were still considered guests in their own countries, why empires cracked but pretended otherwise. Isaac feared her mind more than her rebellion. "You are to attend the winter ball on Saturday. The Kruger family will be there. Their son has returned from Zurich." Elena understood the meaning immediately. "I'm not for sale." He stiffened. "That is an ungrateful thing to say." "Is it untrue?" He closed his ledger with finality. "This conversation is over." But history had already begun to whisper to her. The man who changed everything. She met Samuel Adler on a Tuesday afternoon, an unremarkable day that would later become impossible to forget. He was not supposed to be there. The University of Vienna's public lecture hall was crowded with students and academics listening to a visiting American historian speak about industrial labor movements. Elena had attended out of quiet rebellion. Her father disapproved of political lectures, especially foreign ones. Samuel sat 2 rows behind her. She noticed him because he was listening differently. Most men leaned back, arms crossed, waiting to argue. Samuel leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes intent. He wore a wool coat too thin for Vienna winter and shoes worn at the heels. When he raised his hand to ask a question, his accent cut cleanly through the hall, American, unmistakable. "Do you believe," he asked the lecturer, "that Europe's obsession with inherited power will survive mass migration?" Murmurs rippled. The lecturer hesitated. "History suggests—" "History," Samuel said calmly, "often underestimates hunger." Elena felt something inside her shift. After the lecture, she followed him without quite realizing she was doing so. Outside, snow had begun again. He stood under the stone archway, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. "You challenged him," she said. He turned, startled, then smiled. "I didn't mean to, it just happened." "You're American?" "From New York, originally." She studied him. "You don't look wealthy." He laughed. "That's because I'm not." "Why are you here?" He hesitated, a fraction too long. "Research." It was a half-truth. She would later learn how dangerous half-truths could be. "My name is Elena Weiss." His eyebrows rose. "Weiss? As in, yes." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm surprised you're talking to me." "Why?" "Because people like you usually don't talk to people like me." She smiled. "Then history is already wrong." They walked together through the snow. A love born against the current. Vienna did not approve of them. Elena met Samuel in secret, at bookshops, at quiet cafes, once beneath the Prater Ferris wheel while fog swallowed the city. Samuel spoke of America with a mixture of reverence and disappointment. He told her about Ellis Island, about tenements packed with languages, about factories that chewed men into statistics. "And yet," she said once, "you still believe in it." "I believe in starting over," he replied. Their love grew not from poetry, but from arguments about class, religion, power, and the terrifying idea that a person could choose their own future. When Isaac Weiss discovered the truth, the confrontation was swift and brutal. "He is beneath you," Isaac said. "He is human," Elena replied. "You will never see him again." She did, and for that, her world collapsed. The choice that changed history. By 1890, anti-Semitic sentiment across Central Europe had sharpened into law. Business contracts vanished. Universities tightened admissions. Violence became polite, then public. Samuel was no longer safe. Neither, Isaac realized too late, was his daughter. The night Elena decided to leave Europe, Vienna was burning, not with fire, but with fear. Samuel held her hands by the Danube, the river black and endless beside them. "Come with me," he said. "America is not kind, but it is possible." She looked back at the city she had been born into. "If I go," she whispered, "I lose everything." He shook his head. "No, you choose something." She boarded the ship under a false name. Samuel followed months later, separated by paperwork, money, and fate. The Atlantic waited.
Part 2. The Crossing. North Atlantic Ocean, March 1892. The steamship SS First Bismarck cut through the Atlantic like a determined lie. She was a floating city of iron and steam, her hull blackened by coal smoke, her decks layered by class in the rigid geometry of empire. First class lived above, mahogany dining rooms, linen tablecloths, conversations about investments and opera. Below them, in steerage, history moved in human form. Farmers, widows, tailors, children who spoke in dialects that would soon be swallowed by English. Elena Weiss no longer existed. Her name, according to the folded papers hidden inside her coat, was Anna Weber, age 21, unmarried, occupation, seamstress. The ink smelled faintly of chemicals and compromise. The forged baptismal certificate had cost more than she had ever spent on herself in her entire life. She clutched it like a passport to oxygen. The ocean had no interest in her lies. It rose and fell with ancient indifference, waves crashing against iron as if testing whether the ship deserved to pass. Elena, Anna, had never been so cold. The air bit into her lungs, and the constant vibration of the engine seeped into her bones. At night, she dreamed of Vienna sinking beneath the sea. Steerage. Steerage was not hell, but it was designed by people who believed suffering built character. Rows of narrow bunks lined the walls, stacked like coffins with breathing holes. The air smelled of damp wool, sweat, cabbage soup, and fear. Families clung together, speaking Polish, Italian, Yiddish, German, Russian, languages colliding like desperate prayers. Elena shared her bunk area with 3 women. One was Magdalena Nowak, a Polish widow with hands permanently stained by factory dye. Another was Bridget O'Connor, an Irish girl barely 17, pregnant and unwed, whose eyes darted at every uniformed officer. The third was Rivka Feldman, older than the rest, traveling to join sons she had not seen in 8 years. They became a small country of their own. "America," Bridget said one night, her accent thick with County Clare. "Do you think it's real?" Rivka smiled sadly. "Everything is real until it isn't." Elena listened more than she spoke. She learned how to fold bread into coats to keep it from molding, how to tie cloth around one's mouth to block coal dust, how to pretend calm when inspectors passed through. And she learned fear. Every cough became a threat. Every shadow near the stairwell raised her pulse. If she failed inspection, if her papers were questioned, if someone recognized her accent as too educated, too precise, she would be turned back, sent home to nothing. Storm. The storm struck without ceremony. On the 8th night, the Atlantic rose in anger. Waves smashed against the hull, and the ship groaned as if reconsidering its loyalty to humanity. Steerage passengers were locked below, standard procedure. Children screamed. Someone prayed in Russian. Someone else vomited endlessly into a bucket that sloshed with each violent tilt of the ship. Elena clung to her bunk as water seeped across the floor. She thought of Samuel. She imagined him somewhere behind her, delayed by money, by bureaucracy, by chance. She did not know whether he was alive. Letters had stopped months earlier. Silence had become her companion. The ship lurched hard to port. Bridget cried out as she fell. Without thinking, Elena grabbed her, pulling the girl upright. Their eyes met, terror mirrored in youth. "Hold on," Elena said. "Just hold on." For the first time since leaving Vienna, she realized something essential. Survival was not solitary. The inspection before the inspection. 2 days before landfall, rumors spread like infection. Doctors were coming. Ellis Island loomed ahead, invisible but omnipresent. Everyone knew the stories. Chalk marks on coats, families separated, people deported for limp, cough, madness, pregnancy. Bridget wept openly. "They'll send me back." "They won't," Elena said, though she had no proof. Rivka took Elena's hands. "If they ask," she whispered, "you are my niece." Elena nodded, lies layered upon lies. That night, Elena stood on deck for the first time, wrapped in borrowed wool. The sea had calmed, reflecting a sky thick with stars. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay America, steel, smoke, possibility. She whispered Samuel's name into the wind. Ellis Island. April 11th, 1892. The Statue of Liberty emerged at dawn, pale and impossibly calm. Steerage passengers surged forward, weeping openly. Hats were removed, knees bent. Some crossed themselves, others simply stared, mouths open. Elena felt no relief, only terror sharpened by hope. They disembarked into chaos. Ellis Island was a cathedral of judgment. High ceilings echoed with shouts in dozens of languages. Doctors moved like birds of prey, scanning for weakness. Inspectors barked questions while clerks scribbled answers that would determine lives. Elena's heart pounded so loudly she feared it would be heard. Name? Anna Weber. Age? 21. Can you read? Yes. No hesitation. Occupation? Seamstress. The ink smelled faintly of chemicals and compromise. The forged baptismal certificate had cost more than she had ever spent on herself in her entire life. She clutched it like a passport to oxygen. The ocean had no interest in her lies. It rose and fell with ancient indifference, waves crashing against iron as if testing whether the ship deserved to pass. Elena, Anna, had never been so cold. The air bit into her lungs, and the constant vibration of the engine seeped into her bones. At night, she dreamed of Vienna sinking beneath the sea. New York City. The Lower East Side was a vertical maze of brick and desperation. Tenement buildings stacked humanity like inventory. Fire escapes clung to walls like iron vines. The streets roared with carts, vendors, shouting, and languages colliding into something new. Elena rented a narrow room on Hester Street, 4 floors up, 1 window, shared water pump. She traded jewelry for rent money. Pride went next. She found work in a garment factory within a week. The hours were long, the pay was criminal, the foreman's hands lingered too long on shoulders. But she endured, because somewhere in the same city, she felt it, Samuel existed. The man with no name. What Elena did not know was this. Samuel Adler had arrived 3 weeks earlier under the name Daniel Hart. His ship had docked at night. His papers were legal but incomplete. He had debts behind him in Europe, political ones. He had crossed the Atlantic not only for love, but to disappear. He stood now on the Brooklyn waterfront, watching smoke rise from Manhattan. He did not know Elena had survived. He only knew that if she had, he would find her. History had not finished with them.
Part 3. The City That Never Waited. New York City, summer 1892. New York did not introduce itself. It collided. The city was sound before it was sight. Iron wheels grinding against cobblestone, steam hissing from underground vents, vendors shouting prices like declarations of war. The air tasted of coal, sweat, salt, and ambition. Buildings rose without apology, brick stacked upon brick, as if daring gravity to intervene. Elena learned quickly that America rewarded endurance more than virtue. She woke before dawn each day, tying her hair into a tight knot, dressing in the same gray work dress until the fabric thinned at the elbows. She walked with hundreds of others toward the garment district, women mostly, many no older than 16, flowing like a human current toward factories that waited with locked doors and open ledgers. The factory on West Broadway occupied the 4th and 5th floors of a narrow building. Windows were often shut to keep out dust that never truly stayed out. Sewing machines rattled endlessly, needle after needle punching fabric into submission. Elena stitched sleeves. 9 cents per dozen. If her fingers bled, she wrapped them in scrap cloth and continued. During lunch breaks, she sat with women from Italy, Russia, Hungary. Stories were traded the way bread was, quickly, before time ran out. "Did you hear," Magdalena Nowak whispered one afternoon, "about the strike last year?" Elena shook her head. "Girls walked out. Police beat them. Newspapers called them ungrateful." "Did it change anything?" Magdalena smiled without humor. "It taught us how power answers." Daniel Hart. Samuel Adler did not exist in America. Daniel Hart did. The name belonged to a dead dock worker from Philadelphia whose papers Samuel had purchased from a broker who specialized in forgetting. Under that name, he rented a room in Brooklyn and found work translating for a Yiddish-language newspaper that quietly supported labor reform. He lived carefully. He avoided places where his accent might attract attention. He wrote at night by oil lamp, documenting factory conditions, police violence, bribes exchanged in dark hallways. He sent articles under pseudonyms, each one a small act of defiance. But every evening he crossed the East River by ferry and stood near the tenements, watching, listening, searching faces. New York held millions. Finding one woman among them felt like a test designed by a cruel god. The almost encounter. On a humid July afternoon, history brushed against itself. Elena exited the factory early, an unexpected mercy granted when a machine broke. She walked toward the ferry docks, desperate for air that did not taste of cloth dust. At the same moment, Samuel stood across the street, arguing with a printer about deadlines. She passed within 10 feet of him. He looked up as she walked by, drawn by something familiar he could not name. She turned her head slightly, sensing eyes on her. A cart rolled between them. The moment shattered. They continued on, unaware that fate had blinked. The city tightens its fist. By autumn, tension spread through the garment district like fever. Wages were cut, hours lengthened, doors were locked during shifts for theft and escape. Fires had broken out in other factories. Everyone knew the stories of bodies trapped behind iron. Women whispered about organizing. Owners hired men with clubs. Newspapers debated whether immigrants were a disease. Elena listened and remembered Vienna. Rivka's son. One evening, Elena returned to her room to find Rivka Feldman waiting. "My son," she said, breathless. "He works with a newspaper. He says they need someone who speaks English and German." Elena hesitated. Factory work was misery, but reliable misery. "What kind of newspaper?" Rivka smiled without humor. "The dangerous kind." 2 nights later, Elena climbed the narrow stairs of a printing office on Canal Street. The walls vibrated with the thunder of presses. Ink stained everything: hands, sleeves, truth. A man stood near a desk, reading proofs by lamplight. He looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Time, so ruthless until now, paused. "Elena," he whispered. Her knees nearly buckled. "Samuel." They crossed the room in 3 steps, hands grasping, disbelief turning into breathless laughter, tears, relief so sharp it hurt. "You're alive," he said. "So are you." They stood there holding on as machines screamed around them. History waited politely. What they did not say. They did not speak of names. They did not speak of papers. They did not speak of the men Samuel feared or the secrets Elena carried. Love for the moment was enough, but America demanded payment. The strike that changed everything. In November 1892, garment workers walked out, thousands. Women led the lines. Police arrived with batons. Samuel wrote until his hands cramped. Elena translated testimonies from women who could not yet find English words for their suffering. They believed, foolishly, that truth might be enough. It was not. On the 5th day, shots were fired. A girl fell. Her name was never printed correctly. The city trembled. So did Elena. The secret revealed. It happened on a freezing night. Elena finally told Samuel the truth about her name, about her father, about the forged papers. He listened without interruption. When she finished, silence stretched between them. "You're not safe," he said. "Neither are you." He nodded. "Then we tell the truth to no one. But secrets have weight, and history has gravity."
Part 4. Fire in the Looms. New York City, winter, 1893. Winter in New York did not arrive gently. It came with iron lungs and clenched fists, dragging cold through alleyways and into bones already tired from survival. Snow turned black within hours, trampled by boots that had no patience for beauty. Inside the garment factories, winter meant sealed windows. Owners claimed it preserved heat. Workers knew it preserved control. Elena returned to factory work by day and the newspaper by night. Her life divided itself into two relentless halves, one that fed her body and one that fed her conscience. Samuel begged her to stop working the machines. "You're visible there," he said, "too visible." "So are thousands of others," she replied. "That's the point." She had learned something essential since arriving in America. Invisibility protected individuals, but visibility changed systems, and systems hated being changed. The locked door. The fire started at 4:17 p.m. No one ever agreed how. Some said a dropped match, others blamed faulty wiring, cheap copper, hastily installed. Official reports would later describe it as unavoidable. That word would become a lie. Flames crawled up bolts of cloth like living things, fed by oil-soaked floors and dust-filled air. Smoke exploded through the room, thick and immediate. Women screamed, machines jammed. Elena ran for the west stairwell. The door did not open. Someone beat it with a chair. Locked. Panic became physical, hands clawing, bodies pressing, oxygen disappearing. Someone broke a window, but the drop was 4 stories. "Elena!" a voice cried. "Magdalena!" They locked arms instinctively, coughing, eyes burning. Elena remembered Ellis Island, remembered Bridget, remembered how survival was not solitary. "Windows!" she shouted. 2 girls jumped. They did not scream long. Firefighters arrived too late. Ladders reached only the 3rd floor. Nets tore. Men in uniform shouted orders that could not reverse gravity. Elena did not jump. She tied fabric together with Magdalena, lowered themselves inch by inch, hands bleeding, skin burning. When they fell, it was into bodies and ash. Magdalena survived. 17 others did not. The aftermath. Newspapers called it tragic. Owners called it regrettable. Samuel called it murder. He wrote through the night, ink soaking into paper like blood into snow. He named names. He documented locked doors, ignored inspections, bribes exchanged with city officials. Elena translated witness accounts until dawn. For the first time, America listened. The man from City Hall. Power responded the way it always does, quietly, behind closed doors. Councilman Edgar Whitmore arrived unannounced at the newspaper office. He wore a tailored coat and a smile practiced in mirrors. "You're causing unrest," he told Samuel pleasantly. "I'm documenting facts." Whitmore leaned closer. "Facts can be expensive." He glanced at Elena. Samuel stiffened. "Your accent," he said, turning to her. "Not Lower East Side." Elena met his gaze. "America is large. So are its prisons." The threat hung heavy. The betrayal. It came from a place Elena trusted. Rivka's son, David Feldman, was arrested 2 nights later, beaten, released, broken. "They know about you," he whispered to Elena. "Your papers, your name." Samuel heard everything.
"We have to leave," Samuel said. "Chicago, Boston, anywhere." Elena shook her head. "Running will confirm their suspicions. They will deport you, or silence you." Silence felt worse. Father and daughter. The letter arrived, sealed in heavy cream paper. Vienna, her father. She stared at it for hours before opening it. "Elena, I know where you are. I know what name you are using. You must come home." Her hands trembled. "Empires forgive," the letter continued. "America devours." For the first time, Elena cried for the man she had left behind, not the father of power, but the father of fear. The choice. Whitmore returned with an offer. A closed hearing, a quiet deportation, no scandal, Samuel's name erased from print. In exchange, Elena would disappear. Samuel refused instantly. Elena did not. Because she had seen Europe collapse from silence, because she had seen girls jump from windows, because history only moved when someone was willing to be burned by it. The night before everything ends. They lay together fully clothed, the city breathing beneath their window. "If I go," Elena said softly, "promise me something." Samuel swallowed. "Anything. Write it anyway." He nodded, tears blurring his vision. "I will." Outside, the city slept. Inside, history sharpened its knife.
Part 5. When History Looks Back. New York City, Spring, 1893. The hearing was scheduled for April 3rd. Officially, it was titled A Municipal Inquiry into Industrial Safety Practices. Unofficially, everyone understood what it was meant to do: absorb outrage, redirect blame, and preserve power. City Hall announced it in language so dry it disguised intent. Samuel called it theater. Elena called it an opening. The night before the hearing, rain fell in thin, nervous lines, washing soot from windows and secrets from alleyways. Elena walked alone through the Lower East Side, coat pulled tight, hood low. She memorized the city the way one memorizes a face before departure. Fire escapes, doorways, the smell of bread from a basement bakery at midnight. She did not know if she would ever walk these streets again. The hearing room. The room smelled of ink, sweat, and restraint. Wood-paneled walls framed rows of benches filled with journalists, reformers, factory owners, and uniformed policemen whose presence was reassurance to some and warning to others. Women from the garment district packed the back, shawls pulled close, eyes fixed forward. Elena sat beside Samuel, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles whitened. Councilman Whitmore presided with calm authority, gavel tapping lightly, never hard enough to suggest urgency. Witnesses spoke. Factory owners denied. Inspectors deflected. Then Elena's name was called, or rather the name she carried, Anna Weber. She stood. Her legs trembled, but her voice did not. She spoke of locked doors, of smoke that moved faster than fear, of girls whose names were misprinted after death. She spoke slowly, clearly, in careful English that carried no trace of apology. A murmur rippled through the room. Whitmore leaned forward. "Miss Weber," he said gently, "you are not listed in factory employment records." Elena met his eyes. "Many of us are not." A journalist scribbled furiously. Samuel felt something shift. The exposure. It was not Whitmore who delivered the blow. It was a clerk. A thin man rose hesitantly from the side bench, papers shaking in his hand. "Mr. Chairman," he said,
Voice cracking. "There is a discrepancy in the witness registry." Silence descended. Whitmore's eyes flicked to the papers. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Proceed," he said. "The witness known as Anna Weber appears to have entered the United States under falsified documentation." Gasps. Elena did not move. Samuel stood. "She is the least criminal person in this room," he said. Whitmore struck the gavel harder now. "Order." Uniformed officers shifted. Elena felt the weight of the moment press into her chest. This was it, the point history would record or erase. She spoke again. "My name is Elena Weiss." The name fell like a dropped plate, sharp, unmistakable. Whitmore froze. Several men exchanged glances. Weiss was not a name whispered lightly in European trade circles. Elena continued, "I am the daughter of Isaac Weiss of Vienna. I came to this country because Europe taught me what silence does." She gestured toward the benches. "These women did not come for charity. They came because America promised law." Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Samuels passed. Whitmore recovered first. "How convenient," he said coolly, "an elite European masquerading as a worker, and you, a writer with no verifiable past." Samuel exhaled. "I am Samuel Adler, formerly of New York, later of Europe, blacklisted for organizing dock workers, reported dead in Hamburg in 1889. A collective intake of breath. He met Whitmore's stare. "I survived." Journalists stood now, shouting questions. Pens flew. Truth, once cornered, expanded violently. Whitmore banged the gavel harder now. "Order!" Uniformed officers shifted. Elena felt the weight of the moment press into her chest. This was it, the point history would record or erase. She spoke again. "My name is Elena Weiss." The arrest. They did not arrest Elena. They arrested Samuel. The charge was vague. Incitement, falsification, foreign agitation. It did not matter. Charges were tools. As officers took him, Elena lunged forward instinctively. Samuel turned back once. "Write it anyway," he said. The doors closed behind him. The price of names. Within days, newspapers across the city carried the story. Immigrant fire survivor reveals elite European identity. Radical writer arrested after labor hearing. Letters arrived from Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia. Support, threats, offers. From Vienna came a cable. "Come home now. You have done enough." Elena burned it. The choice America forced. Samuel sat in a cell on Center Street, writing on scraps of paper smuggled by a sympathetic guard. Elena visited when allowed, pressing her palm to the bars, memorizing his face. "You can still leave," he told her. "They'll let you." She shook her head. "Not without you." "They won't deport me," he said quietly. "They'll make an example." Elena closed her eyes. History demanded something again, and this time it asked for sacrifice. The last letter. On the morning of May 12, 1893, Elena wrote to her father, not to ask forgiveness, to return power. "I will not come home, because home is wherever law survives." She signed her real name. Then she went to City Hall. Where this is going. What Elena did next would help shape real labor reforms. What happened to Samuel would be deliberately misrecorded. And what history would not admit for decades was this: the love between them did not end in tragedy, it ended in transformation.
Part 6. The Record and the Lie. Washington, D.C., summer 1893. Power in America did not shout. It whispered through corridors paneled in dark wood, through letters written on thick paper,
through men who never raised their voices because they never needed to. Elena Weiss arrived in Washington alone. She wore a plain dress and carried a folder that had grown heavy with testimony, signed statements from women who had survived the fire, affidavits from inspectors who had finally chosen truth over salary, copies of Samuel's articles printed in newspapers that pretended neutrality while feeding on outrage. She had no appointment. She had history. The door that opened. Senator Jonathan Hale of Massachusetts read her name twice before looking up. Weiss, he said slowly, as in Vienna. As in fire, Elena replied. He studied her face, tired, resolute, unafraid in a way that unsettled men accustomed to fear as leverage. You understand, Hale said, that if we proceed, this will not save your friend. Elena nodded. I know. And yet you're here? Yes. He leaned back. Outside his window, the Capitol dome glowed white, untouched by smoke. Very well, he said. Let's put it on the record. Samuel Adler, officially. The federal file on Samuel Adler would later describe him as a foreign agitator of uncertain origin. It would list his detention as necessary. It would note his death in custody as the result of illness. It would be wrong. Samuel was moved in the night from Center Street to a holding facility near the harbor. No paperwork followed him properly. Names were misfiled, dates blurred. It was not mercy. It was convenience. The guard who opened his cell did not meet his eyes. You'll be transferred, that's all I know, the man said. Samuel nodded. He had learned that survival sometimes looked exactly like disappearance. The committee report. By September, the report was released. It was longer than expected. It named factory owners. It documented locked doors. It recommended fire safety standards, unlocked exits, regular inspections. It did not name Elena Weiss. Senator Hale insisted on that omission. She will not survive publicity, he said quietly, not the kind this country practices. Elena understood. Visibility had done its work. Now invisibility would protect what came next. The obituary. On October 2, 1983, a small notice appeared in 3 newspapers. Samuel Adler, labor writer, deceased following prolonged illness. No photograph, no funeral, no questions. Elena read it once, then folded the paper carefully and placed it in her coat. Grief, she had learned, did not require witnesses. The other shore. Samuel opened his eyes to gulls crying overhead. The smell was unmistakable. Salt, tar, rope. A man crouched beside him, older, face lined by years that had learned not to explain themselves. You're alive, the man said. That's the agreement. Where am I? Samuel asked hoarsely. Officially? The man smiled thinly. Nowhere. Unofficially, Nova Scotia. A fishing village with no interest in politics and no patience for paperwork. You write? The man asked. Yes. Then don't. A boat waited. Samuel stepped into it without looking back. Elena disappears. 2 weeks after the obituary, Elena Weiss vanished from New York. Her room on Hester Street was found empty, no forwarding address. Her co-workers assumed deportation. City Hall did not comment. Vienna never heard from her again. But history, real history, left footprints. 10 years later, Massachusetts, 1903. The house stood near the water, modest, white, stubborn against Atlantic wind. Smoke curled from its chimney. Inside, shelves were lined not with luxury, but with books, labor law, history, languages. Elena set bread on the table. Samuel entered from outside, older now, hair touched with gray. "You stayed up too late again," she said. "So did you." They smiled. On the wall hung no photographs, only a framed document, the first state-mandated factory safety code. No names attached. What history never fully wrote. The reforms passed quietly, then loudly, then permanently. Fires still happened, but fewer. Doors unlocked, ladders reached higher. Textbooks credited committees, senators, movements. They did not credit love. They did not credit a woman who crossed an ocean under a lie to tell the truth. They did not credit a man who died on paper so that words could live. Epilogue. The Atlantic Promise. On calm evenings, Elena walked the shore alone, shoes in hand, water cold around her ankles. She listened to the sea that had once separated everything she was from everything she would become. The Atlantic did not remember names, but it remembered crossings. And sometimes, when the fog rolled in just right, it carried whispers of fire and ink, of locked doors forced open, of love that history almost erased. Almost.